you join me on a very, very windy Saturday. God, it is windy as well. Half expecting to take off. Today we're doing another New England IPA, based loosely around a recipe from Timmi Jenkins, the Hop Maestro. Before then, I did say I'll do a quick walkthrough of what all this is, if we're still here. God, that is a horrible, horrible wind out there. This control panel essentially controls these three pots. This down here measures the temperature from the plate chiller, but that's all that is to cool the wort down, ready to chuck the yeast in. I'll just go through 1, 2, 3 what these are, and this looks overly confusing. Essentially, if you block all those off, I just look at this bit first. That relates to this. So we've got, this is the temperature of the water in there. Actually, do you know what? I've forgotten. I need to do this. How hot is that? Not too hot. Good. So I take that off and put that there, because I've got my water additions. This is to reverse osmosis water from there. What reverse osmosis means is basically, there we go, we've stripped everything out of the water, so it's just pure wetness, and then add in the salts and stuff to make a water profile which would be similar to what would come out of the tap in the area where the beer would be brewed. So this is kind of like, a little bit like Boston, Massachusetts, or somewhere around that kind of, area. It's got a higher chloride to sulfate ratio, about 2 to 1. So this is purely a hot water tank, if you want to think of it like that. And this here purely controls that hot water tank. So this sets the temperature. There's a probe in the back. When it drops below the temperature, the heater is turned on. And because you don't always want that to work, we can turn the heater off with that. And this is purely that pump. Sometimes it's good to recirculate because it keeps the temperature fairly stable. I'll do that in a moment. So that's that bit. The middle bit is for the mash tun. That's that. That's where the grains go. In the bottom is a sort of like perforated screen, and that stops the grains coming out through here. They form a natural filter in the bottom, and you steep those grains in water ranging from anywhere from 63 to 67 degrees for an hour, maybe 2 hours, whatever, depending on the recipe. This particular one, I think Timmi in his recipe has suggested 2 hours, so sod it, why not? So that's all this does. Now this is for the pump here, and on auto, when it gets cold in there, it sends the watt that's coming out of from the steeping process through a coil in here and then back into there, which heats it. So that's a heating mechanism to keep the mash tun at the set temperature, if that makes sense. That's all that is. Or you can have the pump permanently on when we're transferring it to the boil kettle. So that's all that is. So forget this bit and this bit. Look at it in isolation. All that there, up to there, is purely controlling this pump. When it's time to transfer, and I've put this on, I'll be taking this off in a minute because we don't need it on yet. To transfer from the mash tun into the boil kettle, there's a filter in here, and that just stops any rogue grains getting into the boiler. And the boiler is controlled from this part here. At the moment, obviously it's turned off, but I can either have one element or two elements. I'll use two elements to bring it up to a rolling boil, a vigorous rolling boil, and then turn it down to one element for the rest of the boil to keep a nice gentle boil. This is the pump for down there. Bleeding out. Better make sure those boats haven't taken off. And that pump then can either come back up into the inlet, which is a whirlpool, to spin it round. I'm not going to do it today, I'm just going to let it steep for about half an hour. Or you can come out of the pump up into the plate chiller. You then run cold water that way. The wort comes through here and it cools it down to a temperature where you can pitch the yeast without killing the yeast. So that's how this works. It's a free tank system. Some people will use just one tank and use a bag, put all the mash in the bag. That's called a brew in the bag. Other people have got really sophisticated, nice sophisticated computerized control, things like the grain father. Fantastic bits of kit, really beautiful bits of kit. Easy. This isn't quite as easy. This takes a little bit more work, but this is what I can afford. And I'm happy with it, and it's all right. It does exactly what I need it to do. The thing to bear in mind is that I am not an expert. Okay, I'm like pretty much most home brewers, playing at it. All right, I take ideas from left, right, and centre, try and cobble them together. This is based on a recipe from Timmi Jenkins, but I've altered some of the component parts, and that's really what brewing is. The joy of brewing is about. But I'm not an expert. I love the learning. I'm not going to do an awful lot about the actual brew in this. What I'm going to do is probably come back when we're mashing in. What I'm going to do is transfer enough water into the mash tun, put the grains in, give it a stir, then I'll do another bit of video. We've done the water additions, do a little bit on the mash, a little bit on the boil, and then a little bit as it goes into the fermenter. That's been cleaned. It does still need to be sanitized. So I'm going to recirculate the water in here. I'll just show you how that works, because it means just replumbing it a little bit. So all I've done is I've taken this hose off here, and I've got the longer hose going through to the inlet there, and I'm going to open that valve and that valve and that valve. That will let the water, the air out, and then I'm going to turn the recirc pump on, and then that will just start recirculating the water, pull it out of the bottom, through the pump and back at the top, so it will start sending it around. Two reasons for that: it stabilizes the temperature, it makes sure the temperature is pretty even, and it also mixes up that water a little bit in there with all those water all those water additions what I did add. So oops, I'm also going to give it a little bit of a stir. Fuck knows what that is. Oh look, there's a little bit of PTFE tape. Let's got that out. Right, back when we're ready for the mash. It's bloody chucking it down with rain now. What day this has turned out to be. Right, 2 hour mash. First hour at 65, second hour at 68. 68 in a titch, I suppose. I have discovered that the easiest way to maintain the temperature in the mash is to have the Herms donor, if you like, the water in the HLT about 4 degrees different from the required temperature in the mash tun. So this is looking good. This is purely just circulating just to keep the water at an even temperature. We have about 10 minutes to go on the mash. Then I suppose I better start putting all this back together, hadn't I? So we have our filter. Hang on. Okay, we are pretty much at the end. Time for the iodine test. Perfect. Great, that's good. I'm happy with that. And to be honest, after a 2-hour mash, I'd have been fucking worried if we hadn't got a decent conversion there. Right, time now to start doing this. Instead of going out of this pump through the herms and then back in, we've closed the herms off. We have now come out of here, the mash tun, and we'll go through this filter and in through the whirlpool. So open that, and only gently open this because we want it to be as gradual as possible. We don't want to have a very fast transfer because it will suck down on the grain bed. As I said, this is warming up now for a fly sparge, a very hot fly sparge. Can't show you it going in through the whirlpool because I've put the hot basket in, but believe me, it will be going in gradually. And as that drops, we'll take this out. We'll put the sparge ball on, which is that, and then very gently wash the final bits out of that grain bill, or grist as the term is. We've got most of the transfer now of what was in here is now through to here. Next is what we need to do is flush out the herms. This is the bit I always like, because this is where that changes colour. Watch this. Here we go. And starting the sparge in there, and that's as we're flushing out then the herms. So instead of coming from here in through the herms back in, we're coming now from the HLT through the herms and starting the sparge. And you can change, or I can change, the pattern of the sparge by altering the output of the pump. And that's probably like about right, I would have thought. Eventually I might do a spinny sparge arm. I know that that would be more efficient, but for the time being, this is about perfect for me. Right, back when we're ready to start the boiler boiling in kettle. The transfer is now complete. Oh, that's going to be dog biscuits soon. I'm going to feed some to ducks, some to fish, and the rest will be, I'm going to have an experiment making dog biscuits. So now this assembly is ready to come off and go in the bucket ready to be washed. We don't need the plate chiller just yet, as we're just coming up to the boil, and then we go up. Actually, do you know, coming up to the boil, how long shall I boil it for? I've in my head I always do an hour's boil, which is why I always fill it to here, because I know after my boil off, I'm going to end up here. But the recipe that I'm kind of basing this on, which was Timmy's Jenkins recipe, do you know what? I fucked around with it enough as it is. It ain't going to matter. I'm going to boil it for an hour. Also, it's now time to refill the HLT and start getting that warmed up. Hot water for the clean down. Let's come back when we've got a boil going. Nearly forgot to show the pH, mash pH 5.4, which I think is about cock on. We have a boil, a nice rapid boil. Not quite so much inside the hop spider, obviously, but perfectly good boil on outside. The plate chiller pretty much ready. That's the water out. What goes there? Say what you like. I'm getting bloody good at filming one-handed, but not right. Anyway, water in goes in here. This is what the wort goes through, so it's going to come out at here, fruit pump up into this housing here, which that bleeds the air. That's a Wyeast strainer just to catch any of the crap. Goes through here, out of here, and it will go into that stainless steel conical fermenter, which I think is called a Brew Devil. It's from Angel Homebrew down in Chesterfield. Little one-man band business. Well, Paul and his wife. But I tell you what, you'd be hard pressed to find better service anywhere. In fact, the two companies that I always recommend more than any other are Brew Keg Tap, Johnny Packham, and Angel Homebrew, Paul. Right, so anyway, enough plugging everybody else. I haven't been paid to do that. I've got no incentive to do that apart from they're both bloody wonderful businesses, and I like to kind of like give a shout out to wonderful businesses because well, they need our support. What was I doing? Oh yes, right, we've got a boil, we've got everything going, everything's almost ready. Water's coming up to temperature for cleaning everything down. I'm going to sanitize that and then start shoveling this. Start shoveling this out. Might wait till Charlotte gets back, get her to do that. Into there, make some dog biscuits. Boom, job's a good one. I'm currently sterilising, that's different from sanitising, sterilising in the oven a flask, a borosilicate flask, and that is because I'm going to harvest a little bit of the yeast from the starter I've made while I'm tipping it into the fermenter, if that makes sense. So I'm going to keep a rolling starter going. The yeast I'm using is Wyeast 1318. It's kind of almost like my go-to yeast at the moment, that and the 1056. The hops that I'm going to use for this, and this is where I'm going to stay fairly true to Timmi Jenkins' recipe, even though I've fucked around with everything else and put Vienna malt in here and stuff and loads more oats and whatever, and done a double temperature mash. But the hops I'm going to use at flame out, steep them in there for 20-30 minutes. 75 grams of Sabro, 75 grams of Galaxy, and 50 grams of Citra. I was tempted a little bit to chuck a bit of Citra in there as well, but I've run out. Although, and tell you, how about this for service? I asked Timmy last night if he'd just put me some Citra aside until I could transfer some money today, and he said, yeah, no problem. So I sent him the money over this morning. He sent me a little photo back saying, here's the receipt of postage, just for my own records more than anything else. So within an hour of me sending him the order, he'd had it in the post. God, can't beat that. Timmy, get a life, mate. have a weekend off. God. Right. So yeah, I'm sticking with his hop schedule. I'll just go through how I've changed the recipe from Timmy's. Is I think he used lager malt or pale malt. I've used, and this is an experiment. Who knows? I've used 4 kilos of Maris Otter. I've used 650 of those strange Husk on flaked oats, 500 Carapils, 500 wheat malt, 250 gram of Vienna malt, and then do you know what I'm gonna have to do? I'm gonna have to remember to put 500 gram of Maltodextrin in this with about 15 minutes to go, along with some yeast nutrients. So I better go and get all those ready. Yeah, so it's pretty much, I mean, it's almost sort of on Timmy's recipe, apart from I've fucked it around quite a lot. Water, I used RO water. I used 6.9 grams of calcium sulfate, gypsum, a gram of table salt, magnesium, Epsom salts, 2.4 grams, and calcium chloride, 13.7 grams, which is sort of that's my base water profile from reverse osmosis water for doing things like New England IPAs. And it's got the chloride to sulfate ratio at about 2:1, which apparently I'm halfway through doing another video about different books. There's one called IPA, all about IPAs. Anyway, I can't remember what it's called. That's how bloody good it is. But I'll point people towards that. General rule of thumb seems to be for kind of hop forward and NEIPAs and whatever to have a 2:1 ratio of chloride sulfate. But I'm not an expert, guys. I'm not. It's all about playing. But I sort of like what I'm making. I like drinking it, and it sounds awful, doesn't it? But I find it very, very rare that I find something in a pub or in a can or whatever that matches what. And that's the whole point of this, really. I mean, this ain't. You probably don't really save a great deal of money in the longer term after you've bought all the kit and whatever. But the point is about trying to brew something that you enjoy drinking that you can't necessarily buy. The only things close to this, I think, is some stuff from St Mars of the Desert, and also there's Arbor do something called Wyeast, using New Zealand hops, hence the name, the mythical village. Anyway, enough nonsense. Let's stop talking about that. This is about brewing my own stuff to drink, and enjoying brewing it and enjoying drinking it. And it doesn't always work out exactly as I'd like, but 99 times out of 100 now I sort of know enough to get a reasonable result. When I first started buggering around with this, tell you what, I made some stuff that would strip the varnish off. In fact, the canal out there has seen more disasters. Not too many, actually, but that's again a part of the point of brewing it yourself. Is it's okay to fuck it up. Everybody does, and in a way some of the best brews in history have been the results of accidents. It's worth bearing that in mind. So you never know. I won't, because I'm a bit of a bodger, but if you get into homebrew, and there are some people I know who really do take this to the extremes, they take brewing into the world of art and science to the degree that perhaps I never will. But it's the experimenting and the fun, and I know some people who do some of the most amazing beers. I'm happy with doing my stuff, and I'm waffling on far too much, so shut the fuck up. Right, time to weigh the hops out, breaking into new packets of Galaxy and Sabro. Can't believe how much Galaxy I've been using. Right, let's get those weighed out ready. This is the what I've just called another NEIPA, another New England IPA with Citra, Mosaic and Racal. And it's not really ready, it's only been in the keg 3 days, but God, it's stunning. And I've just measured out the hops. And one of the things Timmi Jenkins says about his hops, or someone else has said about his hops, is they're the stinkiest, freshest hops you can get. Well, I measured these out and put them on here. I then went to go and do a couple of bits upstairs to finish a piece of work that I've been commissioned to write. As I came down the stairs, I could smell them. I could really smell them. That's Sabro. God. So I think this is going to be, provided I haven't cocked his recipe up too much. I always think recipes are more guidelines than anything else. If it turns out anything like this, I really get the CaCl from this. I do like that hop. But I think Sabro is about to become my next favourite hop. And then maybe I'm going to start buggering around with things like Vic Secret and Sabro and mix it all up a little bit, and maybe a bit of Galaxy and stuff. We'll see. Right, it's almost time for flame out. No, it's not. What am I talking about? I've got 15 minutes. It's almost time. Well, it is actually time. Fuck it, let's do it. This is the 500 grams of Maltodextrin and some yeast nutrient, which is that's where I've come back to Timmi's recipe now, because apparently he brews a right good fucking brew. So if I can almost emulate his success, I should be very happy. Give that a bit of a stir up, and 15 minutes till the end. Obviously, you know, if this is a complete fuck up, it's his fault. Let's go. That's 15 minutes. Right. God, I hope he never watches these shitty videos I make. But those hops, God. And he's not wrong, or if it's not him who said it about his hops, whoever said it about his hops, fuck me. Do you know, I mean, that is like, this is now, all you can smell in this entire building, this is a big building, all you can smell in here are these, and they are bonkersly beautiful. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Right, 15 minutes to flame out, and then we chuck those in and wait 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Right, good. Well, the wind's died down, and it's not pissing down with rain anymore. We've got about 30 seconds left. I can turn the cleaning water off now. Less than 20 seconds until flame out, and I had to take this out because this was absolutely clogged solid with what I think is called beer stone. It's a sort of like clay, and it was just absolutely chocker with this clay shit. Oh, there we go. Time's up, boys and girls. Let's turn that off. That off, and we now have this is the smell that I love. Is where we chuck our zops in. And almost immediately, oh fuck me, that, God, that is every smell from my youth. Where I grew up, there was a brewery. Well, there was two things where I grew up. There was a glue factory where they used to send old horses, and there was a brewery, and they used to have alternate smells on alternate days, which would determine whether or not I'd go near that particular part of Minster in Kent on the Isle of Sheppey. And but the smell of the brewery is something that I always now is locked into my brain. And it's strange how these little triggers can affect you, because there's a guy whose channel I've mentioned a few times before, Dude's Brews, which is Richard Williams, did a bitter recently, and I noticed it because he uses the same yeast that I'm using for this, which is the Wyeast 1318. But he had a glass of this bitter in his hand, and I instantly had that taste that I had from a wonderful, one of my favourite bitters, which is Harvey's Brewery of Lewis. And I used to know some people who worked there, and I used to know some of the people who ran their pubs and whatever, and I instantly had that that cognitive link, and the taste and the flavour and the smell and everything through just looking at, you know. So yeah, the thing about beer is you taste it with your mouth, but your mind has a huge impact. And just the smell of this now, the smell of those hops, I'm going to give those a little stir, because we want them nicely infused. Oh, that smell, I just can't, I don't have the vocabulary to adequately elucidate what that is. It is amazing. Right, I'm going to close the shutter now anyway, because it's getting a bit cold, and then we'll come back when we're bunging it into the fermenter, and we'll take a gravity reading before chucking yeast in. Yeah. I'm going to be one of those brewing bores and just tell you how good that smells again. I think I'm really getting those Sabro out of that. The Sabro, God, bloody hell. And the Galaxy, I like Galaxy. It's one of my, yeah, it's up there with my hops. Obviously Citra is just, everything has Citra these days. But at Sabro, brilliant. This is what I called my Looking for New England. And I based this on a beer from Cambridge Brewing Company in Boston, in America. And Will, the head brewer, came over a few months ago, and we gave him and Cindy, his partner. I did. We gave him and Cindy, his partner, a little boat trip along with Dan and Martha from the brewery of St Mars of the Desert. And smashing guy, Will, amazing boater. He'd never ever took the helm of a narrowboat before. Absolutely stunning. Anyway, they do this thing called Flower Child, which is a kind of, it's not a New England IPA as such, but it is an IPA, kind of reminiscent of a brew from Magnolia Brewery on Haight Street in San Francisco, which, if anybody knows, whenever Charlotte and I go to San Francisco, we'll have lunch at Magnolia on Haight Street, and it's just up the road from a mate of mine, Christian, who runs a tattoo and piercing joint. Oh, there's a whole story behind that, which is no, you haven't got enough life for me to tell you. So this is the Looking for New England, based on Flower Child from Cambridge Brewing Company. And cheers to Will. I'm going to do a review on one of his other beers at some point, which is uber special. But anyway, I'm just filling in time now while we're waiting for the hop stand to be stood. But that smell, oh guys, that smell. I know it looks a bit shit and murky, doesn't it? But God, the smell. We are nearly at the end of the hop stand. At various times I've tried various different filters. Fuck that. We're going to come down through a bazooka filter. Oh, that's it. Straight into the pump, out of the pump, into the plate chiller, out of the plate chiller, into the fermentation vessel. Now, the plate chiller works by flowing cold water across some plates this way, and between the plates the hot wort comes this way. So it's a counterflow chiller. Set the water going. So the water's now, this is cold water going in here, coming out here, through this pipe, out into the car park. I think I've shown you this before. Anyone who follows this will have seen this before. So there it is. That's the water. And at the moment that water is still ice cold, but in a moment it will be less than ice cold. When I was showing you the control panel earlier, I didn't tell you what this little bit is. This is the temperature as taken from the output of the plate chiller. So at the moment it's just room temperature, what it is in here at the moment, because we've got the fan up there. Yes, fan number 3, still working, not making a noise and hasn't burnt the place to the ground. So it's 22 degrees in here, so everything in here is kind of like about 22 odd degrees. As soon as the wort starts flowing through here, this temperature, this PT100 temperature probe will, on there, it's getting colder, tell us the temperature of the wort going into the fermentation vessel. What I'm going to do is ever so gently allow the oxygen and air, oxygen, I'm going to allow the air to come up and just bubble into the kettle. The reason I want to do that is because air coming out through that mesh should clear any detritus that's around it. Yeah, okay. And then any other air I can release through. Sorry, I'm giving you a lovely photo of Delilah's, yeah, right. So we're now going to get to the stage whereby if I open all these valves, remember the water's going through the plate chiller to cool everything down. We want then the wort to come out of here, go down through here. That's starting to get a bit warm now. That's what we want. You can see the wort is starting to get into the tube at the bottom. So I'm going to start bleeding as much air out of here as I can. I think we're nearly there. Good. So we have, because of the gravity, the wort here is up at this level, okay? So it should push itself down, and even then up through this into the plate chiller, and then out of the plate chiller and into there. You might need a little bit of assistance with the pump. Oh, fuck it. Right, I'll put that like that. Should we turn the pump on? Fuck it, turn the pump on. Is everything open? That's open, that's open. There's no air there to come out. Right, turn the pump on. And I'm going to restrict the flow using this. Hey, we got us some beer coming out, look. If we want to know what temperature that is, it's currently 20. It's cooling down quite quickly because I've restricted the flow. I'll pitch anywhere around 18, 17, 18, I don't care. I'm not proud or an expert. So that's now cooling down. I've restricted the flow of the watt. See the watt level coming down here. Sorry Delilah, I'm showing pictures of your nipple clamps, darling. It's not very gentlemanly of me. Right, now there is another video on my channel here about how effective these are. This will take 25 odd litres from 78, I think it was, yeah, after the hop stand, down to look 18 degrees in less than about 2 minutes. I've restricted the flow, okay, so there's not as much wort going through as quickly as normal. The water coming out of the, call it the exhaust, is actually quite wham. You can't see it. Sometimes you can see a bit of steam coming off it. Now that's wasted at the moment. It will be going into a water butt at some point. Right, good. This is now perfect. It's as we want it. It's coming out at 18 degrees into the fermenter. We don't seem to have had any blockages so far. That's good. All going down nicely. I'll come back when it's ready to pitch yeast, but I'm going to do that upstairs. This final part of the transfer is taking a long time, but it's still going through. So I'm quite happy, even though it is literally a dribble now. I might call it a day at that. I'm quite pleased with the way that little filter has worked. It hasn't completely eliminated the wastage, but I'm not sure really whether that amount of kettle trub in the bottom there does really add to the quality of the beer. I have done as you saw with the Firmzilla issue in the last another NEIPA, I did experiment with the kettle trub. It is bloody lovely, but I'm not sure whether it really warrants all the pissing around and the inconvenience of having so much ullage in the bottom of the fermenter. So I'm going to measure this. I'm going to turn this off in a minute, and then I'm going to measure how much wastage we've kind of like got from the kettle. I don't think there'll be a lot there. I'm thinking probably less than a litre, but that's all right. You can always factor for that. I don't like waste. I'm in Yorkshire. I really don't like waste. Me and waste, we don't, you know, we're not good bedfellows. But I do think we've reached now the end of what we're reasonably going to remove from the kettle. So after tearing everything out, oops, that's what we've got. Kettle trub, I think that's probably okay. I think I can live with that. Less than I will measure it, but I think less than a litre. So we'll just factor in for that in future brews. I don't care what anyone tells you. You ask any home brewer and they'll all confirm that the best part of any brew day is cleaning off afterwards. I was going to do this last night, but I drank a little bit too much of my own creations and got incredibly pissed. So I thought, to do the job properly, I'm going to measure that out, see how much wastage I had in the ullage. I'm not actually too bothered, I have to be completely honest about that. You expect some, and I'm not convinced that kettle trub does, as some people say, improve the final beer. What are we doing? We have a big bucket of grain, what came out of the mash tun. And what I'm going to try doing, perhaps it's not really the best of days to do it, but tomorrow apparently it's going to be baking hot. So I've got these old trays that we used to use when we had our big grow going, and I'm going to put some grain in here and hopefully dry it in the sun, which we might get tomorrow. hopefully. Who knows? It says so on BBC. So that'll be dried grains, which I'm just going to put out for the ducks. I'll put it over on the towpath. The ducks love it. What else? That's heating up for cleaning water. Some of this, because there's a lot in there, hell of a lot in there, I'm going to experiment with making dog biscuits. Ta-da! For Marley. Hopefully it won't be something that he immediately then throws up for the next 48 hours like he did with the knuckle bone that he demolished last week. That was a lovely surprise, finding that in the morning. So doggy biscuits, gonna have a go at that. And then everything coming off the bench, and I'm going to give the bench a good wash down. And I might move that, I think it might be an idea to move that sodium hydroxide out and put it somewhere safe. So that's what we're going to do today. Be back in a minute with a doggy biscuit recipe from a guy online, Damo, who I think is Sheffield lad. I'm not sure. Seems to ring a bell that he's a Sheffield lad. So back when we start making bickies. And 12 hours later, and a titch. The original gravity was 1064. It might have been a little bit, titchy bit higher than that, but erring on the side of caution, 1064. I'm fermenting it at 20 degrees using that Wyeast 1318, and it's going gently. It's a nice, beautiful, gentle little, I don't want it going like a steam train. This is a nice, gentle little fermentation going on here, and the smell coming out of it is wonderful. Right, so 14 odd days, we shall see what it's like. I suppose I need to name this. I named this beer Timmi inspired New England IPA, TINEIPA. That's it. That's got a little ring to it, hasn't it? TINEIPA. Right, 14 days. Then as soon as the fermentation's finished, I'm going to chuck some dry hops in there. I'm still going to stick with Timmi's hop schedule because, well, why not? Why mess around too much with a good thing? Even though I fucked up all the malts and everything. So 14 days. As soon as that's finished, I'm going to drop the temperature to about 14. Which, interestingly, that's something that he does as well. That's something that I started doing, oh, I don't know, a month or so ago. After I can't remember where I read it. I read it somewhere anyway. So it's like what they're calling cellar temperature. So I'll dry hop it, give it 2 or 3 days dry hop, and then cold crush it for about 3 or 4 days, and then hopefully do as close a closed transfer as possible, just with a hose from here down into a keg that has been filled with CO2. So that's it. Timmi's inspired New England IPA, TINEIPA, is in the fermentation stage, which is where the beer is really made. I said earlier, we got a nice big thing of beer there. We haven't. We've got a nice big thing of wort, and then the yeast makes the beer. If you've enjoyed this, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. It'd be lovely to have you. And if you click the little thumbs up thing, it tells YouTube that it's probably worth them suggesting other people watch this rubbish. And if you click the little bell, it will remind you every time I post some more rubbish. Yeah, sorry. What can you say? Right, I hope that's been of interest, and certainly, as these are kind of like lockdown videos designed to break the boredom, I hope this has been more interesting than Homes Under the Hammer or Bargain Hunt. So, until next time, have a good what's left of the bank holiday weekend. Mind you, it depends when you watch this. You might be watching this in November, in which case I don't think we have any. Shut up. Time to go. Bye.